When it comes to national governance, local government is one critical area that has been neglected over the years. Before this administration, payment of tenancy rate, for instance, have not been enforced to the latter as it is now.
Yes.
Now, after we paid the first year, we were about paying the second year, there was a protest from my estate. Why do you make us pay this amount of money and while at the end of the day, we provide our security,
Graded the
we
roads.
grade our roads, we provide our own water. We have been talking about localization of democratic principles, but how well have we achieved that? And that is where I talk about also when it comes to even the democratic culture that is yet to also permeate, even or should I say, find expression in our local experiences. I always like to drive that citizen consciousness first, because every leader is first a citizen, and that consciousness you have first as a citizen is what will inform the decisions and your engagement as a leader.
Welcome to this episode of the Fourth Schedule podcast. My name is Emmanuel Obiabo and I am your host. This is a platform where we host seasoned professionals and stakeholders as guests to discuss issues and foster actions on local governments of Nigeria with focus on the FCT area councils. The podcast is an initiative of Statecraft Foundation and supported by the Nigeria Youth Future Fund. Feel free to follow Statecraft Foundation on social media platforms to keep tabs with the podcast and other activities of the project and the organization. There are gaps in infrastructure and service deliveries at the community level, and most of these gaps fall under the responsibility of the local government. On this episode, we shall be discussing on achieving responsive governance in the local government level. And we have our guest in the studio in person of Joseph Phillip, who is the program coordinator of Goodluck Jonathan Foundation.
Thank you very much.
Also in the studio with me is Precious Ojonugwa Onoja.
I'm excited to be here.
And she is my co-host for today.
I'm excited.
All right. Quickly to get into the conversation, we all know that there are gaps we interact with daily, Joseph. And most of these gaps and infrastructure and service delivery fall under the responsibility of the local government. Why are they not being addressed?
Well, Emmanuel, thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for taking up actually this important conversation, because I think when it comes to national governance, local government is one critical area that has been neglected over the years. And I think that would also bring me even to the first point in responding to your question, which is that local governance generally has suffered from long years of neglect in the country. Whether you want to look at it from the demand side or you want to look at it from the supply side, I'm talking about both the government and the citizens. And so subconsciously, we have pushed down local government to the background, and the focus have been more in the federal and in the state. And I think one other area is also that we are suffering from, permit me to say, the crumbs of the military culture, where you know how it is in the
crumbs of military culture,
where you know how it is under the military system, governance or leadership is centralized, and so everything is cascaded down. And so when we have all that years of military rule without the opportunity of us actually internalizing these democratic principles, you get to see that, and that is one of the things you are seeing. So be it whether the authoritarian approach of even the leadership at the federal level or at the state level, because we are used to having those commands. But
so in essence, are you saying we are not fully adapted to the tenets or
not yet. And unfortunately, the funny thing also is this: we missed an opportunity at independence. I tell people that with the 1999 and 1991 constitutional amendment, where we jettisoned traditional institutions in Nigeria, that's one of the crux of our issues, because fundamentally is that we had an indigenous governance system that was working for us pre-colonial era. Yes, I know there are those that would come, maybe following this conversation, that would say, yes, traditional institutions had their own, what do you call it, excesses, yes. But we missed that opportunity to study, to integrate, and adapt over time. And what we now tried to do was to put a new system into the society, and whether we like it or not, beyond the code, beyond the theory, there is the social aspect. And that's why when you notice in most of our local governments or in most of our communities, you would see that there is that contention constantly between the formal and informal system. And so when there is no synergy, because what you see is, I tell people, when people talk about ungoverned spaces in Nigeria, I say, no, there is no ungoverned spaces. It's just that we are yet to contextualize our governance system to our own reality. And I give you an instance. I tell people, whatever local government or whatever community you go to, there is a traditional structure that takes care of it. But because these guys or these persons are outside the formal governance system, they have little to do. But here's the truth of it. While the formal governance representatives, whether the local government chairman or the councillors, have constitutional legitimacy, these informal local governance structures that we have embedded within our communities have their own social legitimacy, be it whether if it is drawn from religion or is drawn from social or cultural norms. And so that constant contestation, it's part of the challenge we are having. But beyond whether we want to look at it from the cultural or historical perspective, is also, for me, I always say it, the constitution that prescribed local government has also embedded in its provision some of the challenges that is hindering local governance. What's it called? A case in point would be the whole issue of financial autonomy, right? Where we have state governments have to co-manage funds with the local governments. That in itself is a challenge, because
and it's a constitutional provision.
It's a constitutional provision, and that is where, for me, some of the challenges are. But beyond that, even you talk about the leadership committee, recruitment. There is no how you make creation, and for me, those are the issues. You make creation of local governments to be a federal mandate, and then you say administration of local governments as well as the accountability and all to
be supervised by the state.
It's not and if you look at it, that's why you would see that, most especially in the Southwest, you will see it's almost like we have two different local government systems. I had that challenge.
Yes, you have the local council development authorities, especially in Lagos.
Thank you.
And then you have the formal local governments that are recognized by the constitution.
Do you get? And you know how it is. Allocation from the local government is based on what is available at the federal level, but operations and implementation is based on what is available at the state. And for most states, when you engage with them, they will tell you what is available at the federal level. It's not practical. Right? So when you look at this down to even when we talk about the elections, for me, I would say it's a Pandora's box, right? But fundamentally, if there is anything, I think is we need to start looking at the Constitution.
So would that be the excuse for why even, let's say, the little resources we have is not translating? The gaps that still are existing in infrastructure and service delivery still linger?
So thank you for that. Like I mentioned, there is the whole issue of fiscal federalism in terms of allocations and all. But then when we look at it also from the demand side, over the years, what we have had is some level of citizen agency in catering from their needs and not demanding for accountability. And what do I mean by that? For most of us that have grown within our community, we are used to community efforts of people coming together, pool resources, and have some of their issues. Maybe it's grading of roads. At least I know, like for instance, within my estate, almost every year we do that, right? But imagine if you have this estate community coming together, mobilizing in that
Resources,
line, but demanding accountability from the local government. There was this funny episode, that happened last year. That's why many a times I tell people that the coming of this current FCT minister, for me, I see it as a blessing, and I give you my reasons. Now, if you notice before this administration, payment of tenancy rate, for instance, have not been even forced to the latter as it is now. Yes. Now, after we paid the first year, and then we were about paying the second year, there was a protest from my estate. Why do you make us pay this amount of money, and while at the end of the day, we provide our security,
you graded the
roads, we provide our own water, do you get? And so what would the local government do for us? Now, it pushed the local government to the point where right now, as I'm talking to you, at least a substantial aspect of the road leading to my estate was done by Buhari local government. Right? So, which means that when the demand side is active, they would sit up. Right? So, So for me, I see that also lacking. And permit me to also digress a bit. I tell people that is also where I see the oil boom in Nigeria also as a cause, or the oil resource. Because when you have a federal government that is dependent on tax, just that we have going into next year, what you are going to have is citizens who are active contributors into our IGR. And what that means also by extension is that while as you are bearing the burden of governance, you would also as well be conscious of demanding the benefits from it, right? But when you see a chunk of the population not being active contributors
to the tax,
then the demand for it also becomes lacking.
So I think in line with this demand aspect that we're on, I would like to ask that why is it as though the political class, especially in democracy like Nigeria, appear to be out of touch with the needs of the people? They provide everything else except that's if they provide the things that the people don't need.
So there are so many aspects to it.
Especially with regards to the local government, right?
Yeah, there are so many aspects to it, but I think a typical example is, and I'm happy we are within the FCT, is you would notice that majority of the House of Reps members, for instance, are resident and very present in Abuja rather than their constituencies, right? And the same political culture transits to most of our elected officials, where you get to see that majority of the political class that are meant to be resident and visibly present within the communities they serve are most likely settled within the urban settlements. Now, when you have that and you're not in touch with such realities, the first thing is you would not even be aware
of the needs of the people.
And that is where you get to see it. At the end of the day, they are relying on briefs from a particular aid on what the community needs are. Because forget about the technical jargons of community assessment or everything. If I am resident in Galadima, if I live and I transact my business in Galadima, I don't need community assessment to tell me what the priority needs of this community are.
Because you've passed through the same challenges.
Do you get? And that's why for me, most times I agree with most CSOs when they say community. No, but forget it. In all sincerity, give for instance right now, I'm very sure that when you take a census of most of the political class resident within the community, well, in the FCT, majority of them most likely assess the likes of Limi, the likes of Nizemia, and all for their medical
Cedar Crest,
right? None of
not
them
to do advert. Maybe they need to pay us for advert. I mean, we are mentioning
right.
Here.
So, but you would see that most of them don't visit the primary health centers. Truth be told, I for one, I think until during COVID, because of the COVID vaccine, that was when I knew even the location of the primary health care center within my community. I've been relying on private practice, right? So there is that. And for that, I would say I would excuse the political class and as well put the blame on them. But for me, most times I always like to drive that citizen consciousness first. because every leader is first a citizen. And that consciousness you have first as a citizen is what will inform the decisions and your engagement as a leader.
Yes.
Okay, it's been an interesting conversation. We have to go on a very short break, and when we return, we shall continue discussing on achieving responsive governance at the local level. Stay with us. Welcome back. We have been discussing on the topic achieving responsive governance at the local level, and I still have my guests in the studio, Joseph Phillip, and my co-host, Precious Ojonugwa Onoja. Before the break, we had been talking about why the political class have been out of touch with the realities of the people, especially with the local government level. And you have actually exposed something very important, that majority of even the political class at the national level reside in the FCT, maybe due to the fact that they are serving senators, House of Reps members, and the likes. And we even have most of the, what do you call it, the state liaison offices and all that in the FCT and all that. And then some of them also, even those that have not, or those that are ex-governors, I know part of their pension package, they choose where they have, and most of them have houses in the FCT. And you rightly said they don't reside in the rural, they reside in the urban. And in most cases, they don't even, are not aware about your bad roads. They are not aware of the fact that there is no light. They are not aware of the fact that the primary health care centers are not working. You rightly mentioned some health centers where, and it goes on and on. I know of a story, I'm familiar with, where in an office, there was a lunch arrangement. And this lunch arrangement, every staff was entitled to lunch, and the food was not, will I say, enough with the growing number of staff and all that. But the funny thing is that the chef was, as much as the food was not enough, the chef was serving just a sizable portion to every member of staff and a normal portion to the oga. Even the protein, maybe the chicken and the beef, they serve is a good portion to the oga. And so, while there was complaint that this food was not enough, the budget for the food was being reduced. Yeah. Because the oga felt he wasn't, so at the end of the day, the food soldiers were not pleased with what they were getting. And while they were complaining, it was not as if they were being punished for complaining. And so this is just an example of what happens in our communities when you have the people not being aware of what is lacking in the community and all that. And this may lead me to the question I have, quite related to that. And I will just say that I'm just trying to get it because I jotted it down somewhere, and I will just quickly get to it right now. It was quite important for me, and that was why I had to note it down. I wanted to ask you verbatim, not to just prompt. Yes, I'm on it right now. And so the question is, what are the pathways to achieving responsive governance at the local level? And are we on track, or can we still achieve this, or is it too late?
Well, the good thing about our democratic system is that we know with every circle we have the opportunity for constitutional amendment, and I know that is currently ongoing with the current National Assembly. And for me, even in the agenda for the current National Assembly, there are so many interesting reforms that they have postulated. But I have keen interest in two. which is that of the local governance reform and also the traditional institutions. My postgraduate studies was even focused on that. And you may ask, why that? Now, like I mentioned earlier, that fundamentally part of the challenge we are having within our local governance system is historical, because we know at a point in time, what's it called, before the colonial administration, as far as governance is concerned, within the Nigerian context, it has been mainly domiciled with the local government. So whether you're talking of our justice system, you're talking of our revenue collection, you're talking of maintaining security, you're talking of whatever it is. So that means we have indigenous governance system that was effective. I mean, the likes of Ibadan, even before colonialism, had street lights, right? And Benin, thank you. And then you had also accountability systems. For instance, one of the profound accountability systems that I always make reference to is that of the Oyo Mercy, right? Where even as a KBAC, you can be sent on exile when you are presented with the calabash, empty calabash, right? Now, but for me, over the years, like I mentioned, we missed opportunities to integrate these systems into, because you see, at times I tell people, and maybe I can put that question to you: what is accountability in your local dialect, right? Or to you that is Igala, I ask you, what is transparency in Igala?
You can't translate the word like that.
So you see, and for me, those are the challenges, right? Because when you talk about grassroots governance, or when you talk about democracy
accountability in my dialect is like truth. Maybe Okokwe, like say the truth.
Okay, and that's like Ogesha.
Like say the truth. Be open.
You can see the struggle here. Now, this is for us that are enlightened. Now, imagine the ordinary citizen at the grassroots who writes is not this enlightened, have no understanding of these words in order to even translate them into the local realities. And those are the challenges. We may come these democracy principles. What do they mean in our local context? Wow. It is very, very important that, because we have been talking about localization of democratic principles, but how well have we achieved that, right? So for me, and that is where I talk about also when it comes to even the democratic culture that is yet to also permeate, even, or should I say, find expression in our local experiences. So we need to start dealing with that. But beyond that, like I mentioned, it's as I was saying earlier, our constitution also fundamental, because that is the ground norm. And whatever, and so some of those contradictions within the constitution needs to be addressed in itself. But one controversial area that I want to bring up is, and I'm happy, Ima, you are resident. I mean, you are very active within the local communities, and maybe I'll also put this question to you: what is the difference between?
You have taken over my role in asking questions.
What is the difference between the functions of a district head and a councillor?
Interesting. A district head he oversees a ward,
right?
The whole district and all that, and they don't report to the formal government, right? I mean, it should be similar, because and I'm happy because and that's where, for me, when you talk of reforms now, these are or integration. These are areas for me I'm looking at, right? So we look at the district head, the village head, right? We look at the ballet in terms of Southwest, or in the north they call them Meangwa, Dakachi. We ask ourselves, are there ways that we can formalize? Because let's be frank and tell ourselves the truth. We need to stop spending state resources and be conducting, for me, if you ask me, local government elections when we know it is elections.
So from the look of things, it looks like you are leaning more to where we're coming from than where we're at now.
Yes,
you feel like we should have stayed where we were.
Yes, ma.
Maybe we didn't evolve properly.
Because Alan, permit me, you know people talk about democracy. So here's the truth, right? We must not practice elections to be democratic.
Okay.
That is what we need, because we need to understand. Elections must not happen for us to be democratic. So if really we are struggling with having, how would I put it, true elections that reflect the will and aspirations of the people at the local government level, then we can also piggyback into our history, our culture, right, and our system to see. Because at the end of the day, we know, be it there are systems.
If we don't practice elections, how valid will the very popular definition that says government
For
of the people, by the people, and for the people?
So, but then, Imam, my question to you is this: between your councillor and your village head, who do you find true representation in?
Well,
Or-
sustainably,
Yes.
the village head, I mean, is more accessible.
So let me and this is why I'm leaning towards this. So within my research, part of what I discovered is this: when people have issues within their communities, they don't remember their chairman.
Yeah.
They don't even remember the police station. They don't remember the
They go straight
to the
Chief
community.
Palace.
Chief Palace, right? Whether be it for dispute resolution,
Yes.
so if
Someone
really,
stole my goat,
thank
somebody-
you.
Yeah.
So if really we are saying the local government is the closest arm of the government to the people, then the question is, why are we jettisoning away those instruments or institutions that are closest to the people? When you look at it in the north, that currently they are saying ungoverned spaces, blah blah blah, bandits are taking. If you go through those places, you would see that bandits are relying on traditional rulers as mediators or as go-between between them and community members. So if non-state actors can rely on those mechanisms, right, to have access to the communities, why are we not using it as a formal institution?
I think we have established the facts. We now know where you stand.
Yes.
And I would like to ask, are there things that we are getting right where we are at now? Are there things we are getting right? Are there things we should stop doing to maintain the principles of democracy, especially at the local government level? And what are the dividends and implications?
So for me, there is an innovation that I see going on that, for one, I think we are missing out on, and if we are not deliberate about, may not be sustainable. And you get to see, and by the way, kudos to Nigerian Youth Fund for also sponsoring many of these community efforts by young people. But for me, one principal question I always ask is, in terms of sustainability, we know it has to be codified. It has to be legislation has to be provided on. So one thing I've been asking myself is, why not integrate social enterprise into how we deliver local governance? Because when you look at it, you know that there are so many young people that are providing innovations around primarily health care. There are so many young people that are providing innovations around waste management, right? So, which means all these are opportunities to be integrated, right? Yeah. Yes, but beyond that is, when you look at it also, even particularly, I love what, when you look at some of the templates already in practice in the likes of Lagos State and all, you get to see that already there is, when it comes to service delivery at the local government, the state has been able to, how would I put it now, integrate some level of public-private partnership, right? Where you have private establishments, whether they are doing it as part of their CSR or they are doing it as part of, what do you call it? Like I mentioned, the public-private partnership that we have. So for me, these are things that I feel are opportunities that need to be consolidated upon. But beyond that, I think above all is for us to continue the engagement, particularly, like I mentioned earlier, is our leaders are not aliens. They were once citizens,
yes,
recruited from amongst us, right? When you interrogate the average Nigerian, you get to see that there is a deficit of knowledge. There is a deficit of consciousness. Let's even start from consciousness of what the responsibilities of the local government is to him, and what their own responsibility is
to the local government.
Because it's very important. Yeah. Now, once we sustain this engagement and sensitization, I believe, because we would hit that critical mass, which is very important, that you get to see the revolution or reforms we need. Because at the end of the day, be it whether the constitutional reform at the national level or at the state level, the reform would not sustain until when our orientation and culture as a people changes also towards the local government.
It's good to know that we have been doing some things rightly, even though there are also things we need to stop doing or work on, or maybe start doing, however you see it. And I've been so, I mean, it's got me thinking a lot. The conversation has been so impressive. I have a lot of take home, taking us through the histories and all of that. I want to ask a general question. We ask all of our guests that come on this, and we say, what is your picture or description of a functional local government or functional local governments?
Okay, so permit me to be a bit technical to say.
Our audience are not totally technical.
No, but I think fundamentally, even in when it comes to the key, what do you call it? The key features. Thank you, of governance. We talk of responsiveness, right? We talk of accountability. We talk of. So for me, a functional local government would be when I see a society where, in terms of governance, both the demand and accountability components are active and engaging, right? Where particularly also it's where the orientation of leadership is open to accepting criticism, is open to accepting feedbacks, and doesn't see citizens that are expressive or demanding as being delinquent. Because unfortunately within the Nigerian society we have that tendencies where you see when citizens become vocal in terms of demanding for accountability, they tend to be labeled as either delinquent or more of, how would I put it, being... fundamentally, it's just that leadership generally has the repressive tendency. And for me, that's where the responsibility component of governance comes in. So, where, yes, I assume leadership, but I'm conscious of the fact that I don't know everything. And so, when I'm called upon or I'm called to question, I'm responsible enough to answer and recognize that we are all working at the end of the day for the society.
Interesting. Just to mention, I know I've heard of coups happening all over and all that, and I'm just looking at it. What can we say is a similar to coup at the local government level? Is it when we have caretaker committees or we have...
No, definitely, I agree with you. It's when we have caretaker committees, because that's zero accountability.
But the caretaker committees are not necessarily
trying to
imposed because the local government authorities are not working. They are put there because maybe the local government is not loyal to the governor.
So that's where you know. I don't know if you listened to. There was an interview recently by Kagame who said something that for him, he doesn't have problem with coups as long as if the coup is implemented to bring about change. And so, but you know how it is. Permit me, because I know I'm also speaking to an online audience, and fortunately or unfortunately, there is a huge romance between youths within the continent and coups. But fundamentally, the truth for me, in whatever coup or whatever change, in whose interest and for whose benefit. Because when you talk about change, even that is the fundamental thing, right? Is in whose interest.
Coup actually even stores democracy. Most times coups are done. I've not seen a civilian doing a coup or something. It's interesting, man. Although not necessarily not seen a civilian doing a coup. I've not seen a civilian.
No, civilians do coup actually.
But the front, maybe the front.
No, so you know the thing is, maybe you know when you mention coup, it's funny when you mention coup, the first thing that comes to mind is military. But we forget that for the word coup, there is always an adjective before it, military coup.
Yes. Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yes.
Military coup, yeah. So there is possible it's a civilian coup.
So, and that's the question.
Truncating the will.
Truncating the will of the people
is a coup, yeah.
When you read... okay.
Thank you so much. It's been so interesting having you on this episode. I know that as much as we want to be as explicit as possible, we still need to, so thank you so much. Not as if we are scared. I'm not scared. Anyway. Yes. So thank you, Joseph, for coming on to the show. I see Precious has been smiling all through. She's been enjoying every bit of the conversation. So I also want to thank our online audience. I mean our listeners, we thank you for joining us on this episode. And just as you have seen how interesting this episode is, we also have other episodes on our YouTube channel. So go straight to our YouTube channel and get abreast with the previous episode that I've had. And we also have further episodes that are coming. But beyond that, I hope you are going to be putting the lessons you have gotten from today's episode to work so that we can have better communities. Do follow us on social media platforms using the handles displayed on the screen to be up to date with the Localizing Autonomy in FCT Area Councils project and other activities of Statecraft Foundation. Thank you so much and bye for now.